Here's something I really think is worth thinking about. Is it possible to become affluent even with an exponential information platform by telling the truth? I mean, if you think through history and you think through all the institutions and large businesses, they pretty much all just spin a yarn, sell you a dream, bamboozle, hoodwink, long con, disinform, omission, misinform, pretty much all play a game. All the tech companies, they game us on all kinds of things. And for convenience and entertainment, we just give in. How about if we think about this? Is it possible to have exponential truth be profitable? It's worth thinking about. You remember that this is a pretty heavy book, and I have finished it, but we're not finished talking about it. Well, now I've got another one. Lies and Tech Companies. If you purposefully ignore or leave out important facts or insights, that's the same as lying. And that's a lot of popular information today. And there's another little point. Just because it's popular and just because it went viral doesn't mean it's accurate. Doesn't mean it's true. You might remember a couple of weeks ago we were nowhere. Absolutely nowhere.
They pronounce it now here.
What?
It's now here.
Then we had an entire week of no fear. Oh, yeah, there's a trigger. Absolutely no fear, right? No fear. We're just pushing through with...
I said it is now here, the fair week.
What?
Correct, KNOWFER.
No fear. No, that's not what you said. You said no fear.
You have to know fair to talk about it.
No. This week is pretty special. I have an old friend, fabulous support partner, Dean Rush. He's got some interesting stories to tell us about George H.W. Bush and dealing with the truth. Okay, guys, it's really an honor for me to be able to introduce you again to Dean Rush. Dean has numerous times pitched advice and insight and wisdom at circumstances that I was incapable of crawling my butt up out of. And I have really both grown as a man and valued his insights. And Dean, what's your role at the university now?
I'm a professor of organizational behavior for the School of Business, and mainly in the new venture of entrepreneurial leadership.
So, guys, you can see that if you want to ask a guy about truth and wisdom in the marketplace, this is the guy to advise us. So, Dean, let's talk a little bit about your story with Emerald Airlines and George H.W. Bush. Tell us that one.
More than happy to. When I started flying when I was 12 years old, and then my whole career was sort of built around that. And after the Air Force, 11 years in the Air Force, I got out, started an airline with a couple other guys. We didn't know you couldn't start an airline, so we did it. And it was a small, torturous venture. Learned a lot about entrepreneurship through that. But long story short, we had a turboprop airplane that we had purchased from a very well-known star at that time. And it still had the corporate interior. And in the campaign, the primary campaign of 1980, George H.W. Bush was running against Ronald Reagan, Bob Dole, and a couple of other people. And he called, or his people actually called and said, would you charter your airplane for our primary campaign? And we were trying not to act too excited, but it was a paying customer. So we came to an agreement, and we took on the responsibility. And then Ambassador Bush was traveling all over the place and trying to glean votes. And he was following around these other campaigns, which were flying on jets. And so the Wall Street Journal ran an op-ed about him, saying he's flying on this meager little Texas airline when everybody else is showing leadership by flying on jets. Well, to keep up with the whole thing, I, as president of this little airline, received a call every morning at 7 a.m. from the pilots, and they would give me the list of destinations for the day, and then someone in our office would jump on the phone. We would call those destinations to make sure they would accept our credit cards, and we could refuel the airplanes, and if there was maintenance necessary, we could coordinate that operation as well. Well, this went on for a few days, and every morning at 7 a.m. I received that call. One morning, I didn't get the call at 7 o'clock. I didn't get the call at 7:15, nor 7:30 or 7:45. And finally, just after 8 o'clock, the phone rang. And I thought, where have these guys been? And the voice on the other end of the line said, Mr. Rush, I know your pilots missed their call this morning, but they missed it because Mrs. Bush and I decided they needed to have breakfast with us and get to know us. And I want to let you know they're doing a great job. He said, thank you, and he hung up. And I decided at that time that was an evidence of leadership that I would really like to develop. He cared enough to take care of the people that he didn't have to take care of. And to me, it was an indication of not only a great leader, and I think in this past week, as we saw the speakers, numerous speakers on his behalf at his funeral and memorial services, we saw that indicated in 1,000 different ways. So the lesson that I learned from the whole affair was to ensure, as I went forward, that I wanted to provide evidence to everyone around me that I cared for them. And that's what I think President Bush did for all of us.
Thank you, Dean. So just for us as guys to recognize George Bush's evidence to Dean has been passed to Daniel, is now being passed to you. And that's on the topic of storytelling. You were saying that you formed an association of the aircraft people that were selling these high-priced jets to hold each other accountable. And I was like, well, that's just like 360 Minutes, right? Tell me about that association, and tell me about what happens if you...
Well, as I said, I learned to fly at a young age, and through the experience, I ended up with a subsidiary of American Airlines and was asked to set up a company that actually bought and sold executive jets. And we began with really nothing, but developed it into probably one of the top organizations in the world in selling executive jets. Unfortunately, at that time, there were some unscrupulous folks out buying and selling airplanes, and someone rich enough to buy a jet would come in and they would have a very pretty airplane, but not realize that maybe one of the engines was not working or had run out or was out of time and couldn't legally be flown. And these things were occurring, these experiences were occurring more often than not. And as a result, there were a lot of people that wanted to buy jet airplanes that just refused because they couldn't trust anyone. And so some other heads of these companies and I came together, and we picked or selected 10 of who we thought were the top 10 jet dealers in the world. We didn't get European companies, but we did get South African companies. So we included both national and international dealers. And we had some simple rules. The first rule was that if any one of the dealers had a lawsuit against them which was verified, or complaints which proved to be true of their integrity in selling an airplane. In other words, if they had offended a customer, a potential customer, they were blackballed from that company and from that group. And we call ourselves NARA, the National Aircraft Resale Association. That was the first year. The second year, we began understanding that the public appreciated what we were doing. Within 3 years, that group of 10 dealers, and we had blackballed one, so it was down to 9, were in fact the 10 largest aircraft dealers for certain in the world. And people were coming to us, and other dealers were now knocking on our door to say, we'd like to be part of that organization. To me, it was just evidence of finding that if you can develop accountability with the public, especially if you're going into business, if you can develop accountability with the public and then empower the people around you to tell the truth, the people that work for you, the people that you're associated with, you find that it comes back in numbers and it pays dividends in business. Important to understand that we all have the capability to just go the one extra step. And quite often you can get away with hiding the bad engine on an airplane, or hiding the bad engine in an automobile that you're selling. But you're never going to sell another automobile to that particular customer. And you probably will have 2 other customers that could have been referred. But the idea is that you can help yourself tremendously by just being straightforward with what you're doing. Now, it doesn't mean that you have to forecast the future and say, if you drive this car 150,000 miles, it's going to fall apart. You have to understand that everything is reasonable. And if you decide that you're going to help someone with the forecast, tell them what you know. If there's a tire that has been split and you know that it's going to blow on the way home, tell them. But if not, it's not necessary to overdo that particular element of truth. We don't know what's going to happen in the future, and I don't think the Lord expects us to forecast what He's going to do. So He's not going to be asking us to forecast for Him.
That's good. So I know a bit of your Vietnam story, being shot down. You've overcome a number of substantial challenges in business and personal life. And so, Dean, talk to us about what you've seen in the bigger picture of being honest in corporate and politics, and in your personal life. How does that speak in the long run versus the short term, as you said, closing a sale?
I think truth is at the basis of, if it can be implemented as a foundation in any corporation or any business environment, you'll find that it builds for the future. Untruth builds for the past. It's like a groundhog under a flower bed. Eventually, the flowers are going to sink into the hole and the beauty's going to disappear. And that's what happens with a company if it's not set up on the foundation of truth. And over the years, I have gone through some challenges. We all go through challenges. You will go through some challenges. When I was in Vietnam, I was involved in being sprayed with Agent Orange, and they didn't know what Agent Orange was. There was no hiding at that time from what it became, but it in fact changes DNA. And so when I was back in the States, in business, rocking along, thinking everything was fine. They discovered that I had adenocarcinoma, small cell adenocarcinoma, which is a very debilitating type of cancer and very short-lived normally. We fought our way through that. In fact, as I was recovering then, a guy that had worked for me back at Emerald 10 years prior, that I hadn't heard from in many years, called me and said, I know that you have businesses, and we had 3 or 4 at that time. He didn't know that I had cancer. He didn't know that the businesses had gone into some other hands and some things had occurred that I couldn't take care of the businesses because of my health.
I'm going to plug your book. They all need to get your book, Dean.
Sure. I like the book. It's a learning process, and it'll keep you asleep, maybe. No,
I'll put a shot of it right here. They can see. They need to come get your book.
We have those times that are challenges, but we also find through those challenging times that we build a foundation. In the Bible, in James 1, it says that we're supposed to be thankful for all challenges because they build, in one narrative, it says perseverance. And quite often when we've had a tough time, we don't want the time, or we don't want the name of perseverance to be shown back to us. But in fact, it does. It makes you stronger. Well, through the cancer, to make a long story short, through the cancer, this fellow, Dale Niederhauser, called me. He was working with American. They just purchased a bunch of executive aviation FBOs, fixed base operations. And he said, would you like to work in Grand Rapids, Michigan? And frankly, I couldn't get a job. No. And I said, Dale, I have a very short expectation of life. I've had stage 4 cancer, but I'm feeling good. I'd love to do it. And I just had this yearning to get back into aviation. Well, God provided that opportunity. Drove up to Grand Rapids in the snow. We didn't want snow, didn't want to be around snow, but we arrived. And for the first time, I asked him, I said, by the way, what does this job pay? And he said, he told me, and it paid exactly 10% of what I'd made the year I'd gotten sick. Which I now realize is tithing in reverse. But the idea was that I had a job. And, 11 years later, I was president of the company. Now, I'm not saying I was good enough to be president, but I can tell you the foundation of the disease, our fight through it, our family strength, helped me tremendously in understanding what was necessary to deal with people around me and to be able to empower them. And when I empowered them, they made me much better. I could not have achieved that chair had I tried to do it just fighting my way forward. It took getting people to assemble around me who understood what I meant and what I wanted to have happen, and then share the objectives and the strength of being together. I think God has a way of bringing us to that point, and my prayer is you'll find it too.
All right, Dean. Thank you so much for your time. Bless you, brother.
Same to you.
All right.
Good luck, Daniel. God bless. Bye-bye.
Goodbye.
Yay! I get to get out of preschool. I'm in first grade. Why? Because I understand exponentials. I know what the curve is like. I know when you get to a little incremental, measurable increment. So I got 100 subscribers now.
This is so boring.
100. It's nothing. No, you don't understand. In an exponential curve, it's beginning of an inflection point. We get the 360 Men channel name. Yeah. It's like, we're official, man. Thanks, guys. We did it. We're on the map. Thanks for clicking.
What?
It's now here.
Now here.
Correct. It's now here.
Now here? And by the way, that's probably an inverted amygdala hijacking. It's not the downside, it's the upside.
Yeah, I know. Can we play outside?
Okay, transparency.
This is so boring.